All right, guys. So we're going to go ahead and start including a little more information to this channel. Primarily when it comes, you can say current events relating to whether nerd stuff, anime, comic stuff like that. I still want to talk about that type of stuff, but I want to make it relate ultimately to business and tech concepts, which means keeping up with current events in those realms. So today we're going to talk about a pretty big set of news that just came out about the Apple Card, which has been a long-term project for Apple for the better part of a decade. But let's go ahead and dive deeper into this and see what's going on and why they ultimately canceled that project. So, the Apple Car was going to be Apple's attempt to enter the automobile market and, basically push their brand further outside of just phones, laptops, and those type of things to full-blown vehicles to compete with Tesla and some of the other big name automobile companies that, while have been creating mostly gas vehicles pretty much for eternity up until the last handful of years, are also starting to pivot into the electric vehicle or EV market. So they ended up canceling the project because it wasn't lucrative. But there's more in-depth details to this. So let's go ahead and dive into this a bit. First, we don't have the infrastructure to support electric vehicles. Primarily, when you're talking about the infrastructure to support them, you're talking about the charging stations. We don't have the charging stations needed, like more as frequent enough as we do regular gas stations to support electric vehicles without them breaking down on someone out of the clear blue, especially if they were going on a pretty long drive, like a few hours long, and they need to charge, and the charging station is nowhere to be found. Whereas regular gas stations, where I live, I got one right here, maybe 5 minutes. I walk there all the time. Got another one that I used to work at actually, that is about a 5 minute drive. If I was to take a Lime scooter, it would probably take me 5 or so minutes, give or take. So it's not far. And even from there, like before I pass that gas station, if I make a right and go up this hill over here, I can run into two gas stations that are literally right next to each other. And as a drive from here, you're probably looking at still about a 5 minute drive, honestly. Like none of these things are close. And this is all within, if you're going by car, oh yeah, there's another one here too that's also a few minutes away by car. So all that to say, you already have a handful of gas stations that are within a very small area, and we don't have anything remotely close to that when it comes to electric vehicles. A lot of these gas stations that I'm talking about, they don't even have a single EV charging station there to support EVs, even though, at least in the area that I live in, there are people with a good amount of electric vehicles here. Not as much as traditional cars, of course, but they're definitely on the uptick right now. So, to basically fix the infrastructure problem, Joe Biden has kicked off the Invest in America initiative to help get the installation or get the implementation of the infrastructure and charging stations and things for electric vehicles implemented so that people will be more incentivized to buy them, because the lack of the infrastructure is part of the reason why people don't want to buy them. Nobody wants to get an EV of whatever kind, and then they're driving all day, they're not thinking about it, and then all of a sudden the car dies. They can't even push it to the nearest gas station, which might be across the street, because it doesn't have an EV charger. So they have to get full blown towed to a gas station or wherever charging station is nearby, which may not be super close. You may be looking at 10 minutes out, 15 minutes out, when a regular gas station is right in eyeshot, right? So Joe Biden's initiative to invest in America is meant to counter this so that we get that infrastructure in place. Now, the Invest in America Act or the Invest in America initiative is going hand in hand with the Inflation Reduction Act. And through this act, Biden and Congress are essentially collaborating to incentivize Americans to buy more electric vehicles. They're, again, by implementing the infrastructure needed to support the EVs, but they're also doing it by reducing the cost of the electric vehicles, such as Tesla, Porsche, even Hyundai has their own EV out in the market now, and reducing the cost of those as well as the batteries needed to support and run those cars so that people will be more willing to buy them. Because right now, electric vehicles in general, but especially primarily Tesla and Porsches as well, are seen as status symbols, which means they're not meant to be had by any and everybody. So between these two documents, they are meant to reduce the cost of electric vehicles and some of their key components, which will make it more appealing for regular everyday citizens to want to get them. They end up buying them, which means demand goes up and manufacturing will go up along with it, and electric vehicles become a profitable market. This is a classic case of supply and demand. Basically, Biden and Congress are trying to make the supply available, which will increase demand. And when we as regular people and just everyday people, fill that demand by buying these electric vehicles, that warrants the manufacturers to increase their supply so that it rinses and repeats. In this case, supply and demand have what's called a direct relationship. When one goes up, the other one goes up. When one goes down, the other one goes down with it. Here's the problem. Both sides are being handicapped for a few different reasons, or each for their own unique reasons. Which brings us to our second point. The electric vehicle market, as I mentioned earlier, they're trying to make it profitable. Yeah, the EV market has not been profitable pretty much ever since it came out. Even Tesla has not truly been profitable or all that profitable, despite how long it's been around. Because again, the infrastructure was never there to begin with. So people have always kind of steered away from buying it until it popped up a bit more, maybe with celebrities getting it, and it became more of a status symbol. Then people felt a little more inclined to get it, in addition to, helping the environment, keep things like that. But even now, Tesla is not as much of a moneymaker as it could be. In fact, most organizations that are in the electric vehicle market are losing money with each release of whatever models that they release, whether it's one and they're just entering the market, or maybe they have two, three that you can make a fleet out of already. This is another factor, in addition to what Biden and Congress are doing. This is another factor that is leading to allow these electric vehicle companies to drop their prices on their products. But this is where we start to get into a pretty bad cycle that's very common in business. Keep in mind, everything when you're talking about business, it's pretty much about competition through and through, right? So if you have the head honchos of the electric vehicle industry, primarily Tesla, Porsche's EVs are pretty common in my area as well. They're fairly common. And I've seen some Volkswagens here and there, some Mustang E-Mox. I've seen some of those as well, but not quite as common, but they're popping up. But I would say the two main ones that I see on a regular basis are, of course, Tesla and Porsche. And they're being forced to reduce their prices. Well, here's the thing. If they're seen as the leaders of that market, it almost guarantees that other brands that have the same type of products but aren't as popular, and they're usually more cost effective, to cut the prices on their products, which are already more cost beneficial to customers than those other brands are. And when you cut prices, you're not inherently losing money. Like, you're not always going into a loss. It's just that you're not gaining as much as you could have, right? So, quick example: if you loan somebody money and you told them they owe you $30 when they give it back, and for whatever reason they say, I can only give you 25, you still made money if you accept that. You just didn't get as much as you could have. Now the problem is, if that price reduction goes down continuously, eventually the companies will go into a loss where they're not going to recoup their money from those cars and the manufacturing, the parts and everything. And this is where we get into that loop, that pretty bad loop of business. Remember, the goal is to make electric vehicles more accessible. But electric vehicle companies, or companies that are in that EV market, are regularly losing money every time they put money up to put out an EV product. As a result, this leads investors hesitant to put money and pump money into the EV market and to get the infrastructure that we need for EVs implemented, because they don't think it's going to perform well over time, because they're going to want their money back. Of course, you don't invest in something, you don't get anything back, primarily money and then some. That's how you make profit. So if they're looking 5-10 years down the line, they're thinking, yeah, I don't see this being a good investment for me. So I'm not sure if I want to put my money into this if I don't think I'm going to get millions, if not billions of dollars back in my pocket like I should. This is where the supply part is going to be handicapped, because the money that we need to get the parts, get the charging stations and all this stuff, bought, and to reduce the cost of them, they're not going to be made. The manufacturers aren't going to make something that's not profitable. So automatically there's going to be less of these products sitting around in the parking lots, in the warehouse shelves, whatever it is. And so supply is automatically cut, handicapped. And then you can say, as a result of that, because that means less EVs and less of their parts are going to be floating around, well, normally that's where inflation would come in, or companies will make up for it by increasing their prices to make up for the products that they can't use, especially if they've already invested into it. The problem is, the whole goal is to reduce the cost of these EVs and their parts. So if the parts aren't made, if they're not provided to the manufacturers and the companies that want to make these cars, the supply is going to be limited. The company can't use their typical tactic of increasing the prices of the stuff they have to make up for it. And people are already apprehensive about the product, but even if people end up buying those products, they're not going to get a whole lot of money back. So the demand is also handicapped from the customer side. So From this investor side, they're handicapping supply. From us, the consumer side, we're handicapping demand. Another thing that makes me wonder if electric vehicles may not be for the best, and I'm not saying this is guaranteed because I have seen electric like pickup trucks and things like that, the Broncos and stuff like that. So I'm not saying this happens all the time, but this last winter, primarily in the Northeast, New England region, showed that EVs, when the cold is harsh enough, they're typical electronics. Excessive cold and heat doesn't mix with electronics in general, but cold and electronics really do not mix. So if the cold is harsh enough in a certain region, your electric vehicle is going to be out of luck. In addition to the fact that the charging stations and things aren't there and the infrastructure is not there to help it, now you have to worry about the weather being harsh enough at certain times of year, which your Teslas and maybe trucks and things are going to be they're going to be out of commission, possibly for a certain season, maybe a certain number of months. Because if you try to use them primarily like in a storm or just if temperatures are low enough, there's a decent chance that the car may stop. Now, granted, this was the first time I've heard of something like this, but it's something to keep in mind. I don't think it's super common, but still, it's a worry when it comes to electric powered devices. In the version, this is pretty much the same way foreign cars would be treated. If you were to get Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and things like that, they're nice, but they come with a lot of problems. And a good amount of problems, a consistent problem that I've seen when I look at videos that people talk about is you may not be able to use these supercars at certain times of year depending on where you live. And when you let them sit for too long, the battery pretty much dies out. So you have to recharge the battery when you do decide to bring it back out when it's summertime and it's super nice and all that stuff. And for some, it's a problem worth having. It's not the worst thing in the world. But for some other people, it's like, okay, well, this $250,000 car, $500,000 car, just to use examples, is a paperweight for a certain amount of months. And then when I want to use it again, it's a pain in the butt to get it back up and running again. So it's like, yeah, you show you got money, you show you've got status and stuff, but is it really effective? And EVs are kind of in a similar boat. So that is what we're dealing with now, guys. EVs are apparently not in a good spot. Are they going to keep pumping them out? We want to, make progress when it comes to saving the environment and everything, because that's been a battle for quite some time. As well as, again, it's foreign, it's a status symbol. So when you do that, people are definitely going to pump money into it, whether they have it or not. So let's see where this goes. I don't know if EVs are going to up and disappear. I seriously doubt it. But yeah, let's go and see where this goes in the future. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this off right here. If you have any feedback for me, go ahead and throw that to me in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.